Marten took the cedar rafters the way a thief takes a shortcut, quiet, precise, and so comfortable in the dark that it felt like it had been living above the humans all along. The coop sat behind the Andersons' farmhouse, where the yard grass gave up and turned into a messy edge of weeds, stacked firewood, and old machinery parts that never quite got thrown away. It wasn't a fancy coop, it was practical. Cedar frame, tin roof, wire run attached to one side, and a small pop door that opened into the run at sunrise when someone remembered to slide the latch. Cedar made it smell good, even in winter. It also made it warm enough that the chickens could survive cold snaps without the heat lamp running all night. Hollis Anderson liked Cedar for reasons he could explain: rot resistance, easy to work with, local supply. He didn't like predators, and he didn't like excuses. "I built this tight," he told his daughter June every time she asked why the coop door had 3 different latches. "Tight is cheaper than replacing birds." June was 17, tall and tired of hearing "cheaper than" used as the end of every sentence. She loved the chickens anyway, loved their stupid personalities, their little arguments over scratch, the way one old hen insisted on roosting in the same corner even when it was clearly drafty. June named them, even though her father pretended not to listen. Pepper, Dune, Sunny, Mabel, and a white hen June called Queen, because she behaved like she owned the run. They were good birds. They laid well. They had survived foxes and hawks and the neighbor's dog that couldn't resist chasing anything that ran. What they hadn't faced yet was a Marten that understood buildings. The first sign something was off came as silence. June woke before dawn out of habit. School day, chores day, life day. She pulled on a hoodie and stepped onto the back porch with a bucket of feed. The air was cold enough to make her nostrils sting. The yard was still blue with early light, and frost held the weeds stiff. Usually, the coop was already awake. Chickens didn't sleep like humans. They rustled and muttered, little conversational clucks from the roost, the occasional irritated squawk when someone shifted wrong. By the time June reached the coop, Pepper normally complained first, always Pepper. This morning, nothing. No rustle, no clucks. The chickens slept late. June slowed, confused. She paused with one hand on the run gate and listened harder. Still nothing. A chill crawled up her arms that had nothing to do with weather. She pushed open the run gate. The hinge creaked. Inside, the ground was littered with old straw and a few frozen droppings. The chickens should have stirred at the sound. They didn't. June's heart thudded. "Pepper," she called softly, feeling ridiculous immediately. She walked to the coop door and checked the latches, 2 hooks and a sliding bolt. All were still fastened, so nothing big had forced its way in. But silence didn't happen by accident. June unhooked the latches and opened the coop door slowly. Warm air drifted out, smelling of cedar and feathers. Inside, the roost bar was full of chickens, exactly where they should be. Their bodies were fluffed, eyes closed, heads tucked. Alive. June's pulse eased for half a second. Then she noticed something else. The chickens weren't just sleeping. They were pressed. All of them were clustered tighter than usual, bodies angled inward as if they'd agreed to share heat. Even Queen, who normally insisted on personal space, was wedged in the middle like she'd accepted a truce. Chickens didn't do truce without a reason. June stepped closer, peering up into the dim rafters where the cedar beams crossed under the tin roof. Dust hung in the air. A few spider webs trembled. And there, high on the cedar rafters, was a small shape, stretched along the beam like a shadow with fur. Marten. June froze, breath catching. It wasn't large, maybe 2 feet long with tail included. Sleek brown fur, a pale patch under the throat, a narrow face and dark eyes that looked too intelligent for something that small. Its body was draped along the beam with a kind of lazy confidence, paws tucked, tail hanging slightly. It looked down at June as if she'd interrupted it. June's brain flashed through every predator she knew: foxes outside, hawks above, raccoons at the feed bin. Martens were different. Martens didn't usually show themselves. They slipped in, killed fast, and left chaos. But this one wasn't killing. It was waiting. June backed up a step, slow. "Dad," she whispered, then louder. "Dad." The house behind her remained quiet for a beat. The Marten didn't move. It didn't flee. It didn't chatter. It simply watched. June's mouth went dry. Why wasn't it leaving? Why was it so calm? She glanced down at the chickens. Pepper's eye opened a slit, saw the rafter shadow, and closed again. Not asleep. Hiding. Pretending to be asleep. That scared June more than a squawk would have. Chickens were loud when they panicked. Loud meant the threat was immediate and visible. Quiet meant the threat was above them, and they'd learned noise didn't help. Footsteps thumped on the porch behind June. Hollis appeared, pulling on his jacket, hair still messy, face set in that expression he wore when he expected trouble. "What?" he demanded, already annoyed at being summoned before coffee. June didn't point wildly. She lifted her chin toward the rafters. Hollis stepped into the coop doorway and looked up. His face changed fast, annoyance to focus to anger. "Well, I'll be," he muttered, cutting himself off. The Marten finally moved, stretching slightly like a cat waking. It shifted its weight along the beam, claws gripping Cedar with effortless ease. It didn't drop. It didn't run. It repositioned to keep the best vantage. Hollis's jaw tightened. "How'd it get in?" he snapped, as if the answer should appear on the wood. June swallowed. "The latches are still locked," she said. Hollis scanned the walls, the roofline, the corners where Cedar met tin. His eyes caught on something June hadn't noticed: a small gap where the tin roof overlapped the cedar frame near the back corner. It was no bigger than a fist, the kind of gap you wouldn't worry about because no fox could fit through it and no raccoon could squeeze. But a Marten could. Hollis swore under his breath, the kind of curse that meant he was thinking about money and pride at the same time. "It's been using the rafters," he said, voice low. June kept her voice quiet so she wouldn't spook the chickens. "It's not attacking," she whispered. "Why?" Hollis stared at the Marten, then at the clustered hens. "It's hunting," he said. June frowned. "But it's not killing." Hollis's eyes narrowed. "Not yet," he said. He stepped fully into the coop, careful but confident. He didn't wave his arms like a fool. He knew enough to respect teeth. He grabbed the long-handled broom from the corner, June's broom, the one she used to sweep straw, and lifted it toward the rafters. "Get out," he said, voice firm. The Marten didn't bolt. It slid along the beam like liquid, moving away from the broom's reach, but not leaving the coop. It stopped above the nesting boxes, where warm air rose from the hens' bodies and the straw held heat. Hollis jabbed upward again, not hitting, just threatening. The Marten shifted again, faster now, and June saw something she hadn't considered. It wasn't trapped. It was choosing positions. It knew the structure. It knew where Hollis could reach and where he couldn't. It had taken the cedar rafters as its territory. "Dad," June said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Don't make it drop into them." Hollis paused, breath hard. He glanced at the chickens, understanding. If the Marten panicked and fell, it could slash and bite in desperation. That would be chaos, and chaos was when predators killed. Hollis lowered the broom slightly, thinking. June's mind raced too. She'd seen videos of Martens in barns, quick and brutal. But this one was behaving like it was testing. Learning. The chickens remained motionless, pretending sleep. Their strategy was passive. Don't move, don't attract. The Marten strategy was patient. Wait until movement makes opportunity. And then June noticed what the Marten kept glancing at. Not the hens directly, but the corner near the roost beam where a small gap led back toward the roof overlap. An exit. It wasn't trapped. It was confident, because it had a route. Hollis saw it too, because he followed the Marten's eyes. "It's got a hole," he said, grim. June nodded. "We need to close it," she whispered. Hollis's mouth tightened. "Today," he said. The Marten shifted again, and this time it made a soft sound, almost a chirp. Not a threat, more like a comment. It looked down at them, then moved toward the roof gap, disappearing into the shadow space between tin and cedar as smoothly as if the building had opened a door for it. June exhaled shakily. The coop felt suddenly larger without that furred shadow above. The chickens stayed pressed together for another minute, then slowly began to stir, as if they were waiting to confirm the danger was truly gone. Pepper clucked once, quiet. Queen stretched her neck and blinked, offended at having been forced into closeness. Hollis stood in the doorway staring up at the rafters like he wanted to fight the entire roof. "It'll be back," he said, voice tight. June nodded, already knowing. A predator that found a warm, safe structure with food inside didn't forget it. Her father walked around the coop exterior, inspecting the tin overlap, the frame corners, the wire run. June followed, bucket of feed forgotten. At the back corner, Hollis found the entry point, a bent edge of tin pulled up slightly, likely from a storm last fall. Beneath it, a dark gap into the insulation space. Marten sized, perfectly. Hollis pressed his fingers against it and hissed when the cold metal bit. "I missed this," he said, not as confession, as accusation against himself. June looked at the gap and felt a mix of anger and fear. It was so small. That tiny opening had turned their sturdy cedar coop into someone else's hunting ground. "We can patch it," June said quickly, trying to sound confident. Hollis nodded, already in fix-it mode. "We patch," he said, "and we change the roost." June frowned. "Change the roost." Hollis gestured up. "If it can sit above them, it controls them," he said. "Chickens won't sleep right. They'll get stressed. They'll stop laying. They'll get sick. Predators don't have to kill to cause damage." June stared at her father, surprised by the depth of his understanding. He wasn't just angry about losing chickens. He was angry about losing control of the system. They spent the next hour doing the only thing you could do when you couldn't outfight a clever animal. You out-engineer it. Hollis fetched tin snips and a sheet of flashing from the barn. June held a ladder steady while he climbed and bent the metal back into place, hammering it down, screwing it tight. They sealed every overlap with screws and washers, not nails. Nails loosened. Marten's exploited looseness. Inside, June adjusted the coop routine. She spread fresh straw and made sure the nesting box lids were secure. She scattered feed to calm the birds. She spoke to them softly as if her voice could tell their bodies to relax. By noon, the coop looked normal again. But June knew normal was a fragile lie. A Marten had found them once. It had learned the structure, the smells, the rhythm of morning. It had tested their response and discovered something important. Humans were slow when they were sleepy. Chickens were quiet when they were afraid, and cedar rafters made an excellent perch. That evening, as the light turned gold and the chickens went in to roost, June stood in the yard longer than usual, watching the roof line. Nothing moved, no shadow, no rustle. But she couldn't shake the image of that sleek body on the beam, watching like it had all the time in the world. The chickens went to sleep. June didn't trust that they would sleep early again, because once a Marten takes the rafters, it rarely gives them up without trying one more time. June didn't sleep well that night. She drifted off for an hour, then woke with the sense that someone had called her name. The house was quiet. The hallway was a dark tunnel. From outside came the faint sound of wind in the poplar tree, and, somewhere farther off, the soft bark of a neighbor's dog that never barked without a reason. June lay still, listening. Nothing. She told herself she was being dramatic. She'd seen a predator, and now her brain was trying to turn every creak into teeth. Still, when she finally fell asleep again, she dreamed of cedar beams and dark eyes looking down through dust. Before dawn, she was already dressed. Hollis was at the kitchen counter with his coffee, staring out the window like he'd been awake for hours. His hair was combed wrong, which meant he'd run his hands through it too many times. "You hear anything?" June asked, trying to sound casual. Hollis's mouth tightened. "No," he said. "That's what I don't like." June nodded. Silence again. Silence was the Martens' specialty. They went out together. The yard was stiff with frost, the grass crunchy under boots. The coop sat in the half-light, tin roof pale, cedar walls dark. The chickens were still inside. No clucking yet, no rustling. The same unsettling quiet. Hollis didn't head straight to the door. He walked a slow circle around the coop first, scanning the roofline and corners where they'd patched. June followed, eyes scanning too. At the back corner where the tin overlap had been lifted, the patch looked solid. Screws caught faint light. The flashing lay flat. No gap, no claw marks. Hollis grunted, satisfied but not relaxed. He checked the wire run next, running a gloved hand along the bottom edge where fencing met ground. Foxes dug. Dogs pushed. Raccoons tested latches. Marten squeezed. Everything looked fine. Hollis turned toward the coop door. "If it's back," he said, voice low, "we deal with it different. No broom. Broom just teaches it where you can't reach." June swallowed. "So what?" she asked. Hollis's eyes stayed on the coop. "We catch it," he said. June felt a twist in her stomach. She didn't like the sound of that sentence, but she also didn't like the alternative, living with a predator above the birds. "How?" she asked. Hollis didn't answer yet. He unlatched the coop door slowly, listening as if the latch click could reveal something in the rafters. He opened the door. Warm air came out. Cedar and feathers. The chickens were on the roost, alive again, pressed together again, tighter than normal. Their eyes were open now, though, watching the doorway like a group of people waiting for a bad announcement. June stepped in quietly, looking up. The rafters were empty. No sleek body, no tail hanging. Her shoulders loosened. Then she saw it. A small scattering of straw on the floor that hadn't been there yesterday. Not from the chickens. It was in a neat trail that led from the nesting boxes toward the far wall. June crouched and touched the straw. It was damp. Fresh. Hollis saw it too. He didn't speak. He simply walked along the wall, eyes scanning every seam where cedar met tin, every place where a nail head could hide a gap. June looked down at the chickens again and noticed something else. The roost bar had tiny scratches on it, fresh, pale marks where claws had gripped. Not chicken claws. Marten claws. It had been inside. But it wasn't inside now. June's mouth went dry. "Dad," she whispered. Hollis held up one finger, quiet, and moved to the nesting boxes. He lifted the lid slowly. A hen hissed softly from inside. Then, a fast blur shot out from the shadow gap behind the nesting box wall. June startled backward, heart slamming. The Marten streaked along the interior wall at floor level, low, unbelievably fast, then leapt, claws catching a crossbeam, and in two fluid movements, it was on the rafters again. It had used a different entry. Not the roof gap they patched. It had found another route. Hollis swore once, sharp. He didn't grab a broom. He did exactly what he'd warned he would do. He stopped moving and watched. The Marten froze on the beam, eyes on Hollis. It wasn't panicked. It looked annoyed, like yesterday, like a creature whose routine had been interrupted. June forced herself to breathe quietly. She followed the Marten's gaze. It wasn't looking toward the roof patch anymore. It was looking toward the nesting boxes again, toward the wall behind them, where the cedar boards met the concrete base. June's mind clicked. The old ventilation gap. They'd always left a small space there for airflow to reduce moisture buildup. Hollis had insisted on it years ago to prevent mold. It was covered with hardware cloth, or at least it was supposed to be. June moved closer and squinted. The hardware cloth was there, but one corner had been pulled loose, bent inward, just enough for a slender animal to squeeze through. Hollis followed her eyes. His face went hard. "It's been peeling it," he said, voice controlled, almost impressed against his will. June stared at the bent mesh. A Marten didn't need a big hole. It needed an edge to work with, a corner, a weakness. "How long?" she whispered. Hollis's jaw flexed. "Long enough," he said. Above them, the Marten shifted, repositioning like a chess piece. It wasn't trapped. It was evaluating. Then it made a soft, quick chatter sound, almost like a bird call. The chickens flinched as one. June's pulse spiked. "What was that?" she asked. Hollis's eyes narrowed. "A warning," he said. "Or it's calling." June stared at the rafters. Calling for what? Another Marten? Hollis's hand lifted slightly and then stopped. He didn't want to startle it into dropping among the hens. He backed out of the coop slowly, motioning June with a small tilt of his head. They stepped into the cold yard and closed the coop door quietly, not locking it fully, just resting the latch so it wouldn't swing. Hollis turned to June. His voice was low and urgent. "Go get the live trap," he said. June blinked. "We have one?" she asked. Hollis pointed toward the barn. "Old raccoon trap," he said. "Back shelf. Hurry." June ran, boots slipping slightly on frost. She rushed into the barn, heart hammering, and found the cage trap dusty and stiff in the corner. She dragged it out, metal scraping, and grabbed a can of sardines from the pantry shelf in the mudroom because she'd seen her father use them once for a stray cat. When she returned, Hollis was crouched by the coop wall, examining the bent hardware cloth like a mechanic looking at a cracked belt. "It's loose here," he murmured. "It's coming in low, behind the boxes, then climbing." June held up the trap. "Now what?" she asked. Hollis took it, checked the trigger plate, and nodded. "We don't set it inside the coop," he said immediately. "Too risky. If it triggers in there, chaos." "Then where?" June asked. Hollis's gaze swept the exterior. "Between the coop and the woodpile," he said. "It's using the woodpile as cover. It'll run that line." June looked toward the woodpile stacked against the fence, a messy wall of split cedar and pine. Perfect hiding, perfect travel route. They carried the trap quietly and placed it on packed ground along the narrow corridor between coop and woodpile. Hollis set the sardines at the far end, deep inside so the animal would have to step fully onto the trigger plate. The smell hit June's nose immediately, strong, oily. Hollis wiped his hands on his jeans. "Now," he said, "we wait." June swallowed. "What about the chickens?" she asked. Hollis looked at the coop. "They stay in longer," he said. "No free range this morning. Less motion. Less chance it drops on them." June nodded, hating the idea of keeping them cooped, but understanding. They went back inside the house and watched through the kitchen window like people waiting for a storm to decide where it would land. Minutes crawled. The sky brightened. A few chickens began to cluck inside, restless. Then June saw movement. A sleek brown shape slid along the shadow line of the woodpile, low and fast, almost invisible until it reached the trap corridor. It paused, head lifting slightly, nose twitching. The Marten. It was outside now. It had left the coop. Hollis's hand tightened on his mug. "There," he whispered. The Marten approached the trap with careful steps, not charging. It circled once, sniffing. It tapped the cage side with a paw. June held her breath. The Marten backed away, then approached again, head lowered, eyes fixed on the sardines. It placed one paw inside the cage, then two, body sliding forward. It stopped, sniffed again. Then, quick as a blink, it darted in. The trap door snapped shut with a metallic clank. June jumped despite herself. Inside the cage, the Marten exploded into movement, spinning, biting at the bars, slamming its body against metal. It wasn't huge, but its energy made it seem larger. Its eyes were wide now, no longer calm. Hollis set his mug down and moved immediately, purposeful. "Don't go close," he warned June, but she was already at his shoulder. They stepped outside together. The Marten threw itself against the cage again, the whole trap rattling. The sardines were untouched, scattered. June's heart pounded with a mix of relief and guilt. "Now what?" she asked. Hollis crouched, keeping his hands away from the bars. "Now we relocate," he said, voice firm. "Far, not just down the road." June stared at the animal's frantic motion. "It'll come back," she said, because she couldn't stop thinking about the chatter call, the possibility of more. Hollis's eyes narrowed. "Maybe," he admitted. "But not today, and not from that hole." He stood and looked at the coop with a different kind of anger now. Not anger at the animal, but at the weakness in his construction. He'd built Cedar tight. He'd bragged about it. And a Marten had still taken the Rafters. June followed his gaze and felt the same thing. This wasn't just a predator story. It was a lesson in how small gaps became big problems when the wrong animal noticed them. They carried the trap, carefully with gloves and distance, into the bed of the truck. The Marten quieted slightly once it stopped moving, panting, eyes tracking everything. It looked small again. It looked like a creature doing what its body demanded in winter. Find warmth, find food, avoid danger. Hollis started the truck and backed out. June watched the coop as they drove away. The tin roof glinted. The cedar walls looked innocent. Inside, the chickens would finally start making noise again once the shadow overhead was gone. But June knew the truth that would stick with her long after the season changed. The chickens had slept late because they'd learned something before the humans did. When danger lives in the rafters, you don't waste energy screaming. You stay still, and you wait for the morning to decide whether the shadow above you is hungry enough to drop.